Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, welcome to the 14th event of our series Data Heroes. And today I'm very pleased to announce that we have Richard Walker from Denodo with us. My name is Gero Presser. I'm from Queenscape, and I'm happy to guide you through our questions today. Richard Walker is Senior Vice President and Chief Customer Officer at Denodo. And today I want to talk to him about logical data platforms and customer success. Okay, so Richard, thanks for joining us. Thanks for taking the time and talking to us. Will you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Rich Walker. I'm the Chief Customer Officer with Denodo Technologies. Been with the company for about 17 years and managing sales for most of that. And now I've gone over to customer success to manage post-sales, really manage the value delivery that our customers are getting out of the platform. I started out as an engineer and have been involved in software industry too long to mention, right? From that perspective. But, I'm pleased to be here today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And you work for one of our key partners, Denodo. Could you please briefly summarize what Denodo does exactly? Why do so many customers buy solutions from Denodo?
Yeah. So Denodo's been around about 20 years, which is surprising to many people. From that perspective, it's sort of a hidden gem, as you might say. And really the best way to describe it is the problems that we solve. And there's three problems. One, if you look at the explosion of data that customers are having to deal with today, they're literally trying to figure out, how do I store it? And so their problem is that they're constantly striving to figure out, okay, the traditional ways were way too costly, so they're driving to data lakes, they're driving to cloud solutions to address that cost, explosion as the data correspondingly explodes. The problem is that's very disruptive to the business to get access to the data. So that's problem number one, is how do you enable IT to maintain their cost, but at the same time enable access to the data? So that's one problem. The second problem is the business is in a very hyper-competitive environment today. Today, in the past, you could have a pretty discrete market. You could have boundaries around that market, and you could pretty much sell and market into that, industry or marketplace without much competition in the past. Today, with the breakdown of barriers electronically, you now have competitors who can come in and really be quite disruptive to your market. So the business is now having to be very responsive very quickly with new products, new responses. And so they have to be far more productive, and they also need the data. And yet IT is sort of creating disruption on their end. The business on their side is trying to be much faster in response and better decision making. So you got sort of two competing challenges. Then you have a third business problem, and that's one of governance and security. With heightened regulations, heightened sort of, the electronic movement of data, people are now hacking into the system, so you have this higher security requirement. You also have a governance of people wanting to protect their personal PII type data. So regulations are in place, financial regulations are in place. So you have this sort of perfect storm where the governance and security people are requiring this high level of compliance that slows down decision and access, slows down and puts extra cost on IT who's trying to reduce their cost. So this conflict of speed by the business, cost reduction by IT, compliance by the organization, the logical platform sits right between those three and sort of decouples them and allows them to address all three, meaning that IT can now store the data wherever it's most cost effective without affecting the business. Because you can now create this logical sort of framework that sort of says, okay, let's model the data semantically in a logical way of how the business wants to consume it. So now IT can move the data wherever they want. They just connect to the bottom of the semantic model. At the top of the semantic model are the business views, and the business just connects to those business views and says, I got access to all my data. and governance can go in between and add in their governance and security in between. So all three get what they want: speed and access to data. IT can move the data wherever they want, the most cost effective, and governance and security are easily maintained. So that's what we're delivering with a logical, data fabric or logical data management. It's interesting. The different companies call it different things because it's something new. So there isn't what I would call a generic term, but it's almost like thinking about the plumbing in your home. If you ask your spouse, your partner, says, what's the value of the plumbing in your house? People go, well, I don't know. But when it stops working, they'll tell you very quickly, okay, the value of it, okay? And so you think about a logical data management platform as being something that is like the plumbing inside your house, the wiring inside your house. It's sort of invisible, but you're able to go plug and play anything, anywhere else, and you're guaranteed to get exactly what you want. Right? And that's really what you're providing, all right, from that perspective.
Wow, thank you. That definitely makes a lot of sense. However, it really sounds like a very integral part of a company, of the whole ecosystem. If it combines IT, business, governance, it's responsible for the speed of delivery of data. So it's something very important. And I can imagine that implementing such a full-blown logical data platform is probably quite a huge project. Therefore, I was wondering, how do customers typically approach projects like this? Do they start small with, let's say, a vertical solution and then grow? Or is it also really possible to implement the whole plumbing, the whole platform in one step? What is, in your experience, the most successful way?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. It's across the map, meaning it's almost like your classic bell curve. We have people who are doing the whole enchilada, right, to very small and somewhere in between. And it really has to come down to what the initiative is or what the key business problem. The concept is don't fix it if it is a broken concept, all right? But you also have to understand that if you look at the history of IT, there's always been huge sort of evolutionary leaps with regards to the business initiatives or business issues that are going on. And so as you look to the future, all companies, for their own survival, from a cost, from a business, from a compliance, has to implement some type of framework like this. It's the only way they can maintain their business. And what our customers are telling us is that this logical data framework that sits in the middle is a place where they're going to store their intellectual capital. What I mean by that is the business rules of how they run their business. Today, what happens is their business rules are stored inside their data sources, are stored inside their applications, are stored over here in governance systems. It's really dispersed. And what happens is anytime I want to change, it becomes a real problem of where are my rules and who is impacted if I change a rule. And so by centralizing those business rules, all right, meaning literally decoupling from where I store the data, decoupling from how I use the data, decoupling it from these other systems. But literally that semantic model is my intellectual property, right, of how I run my business, all right, becomes very powerful because it makes me agile. So now getting back to, okay, how do I implement? Well, typically what our customers do is I usually will see two different types of projects. One is a project around a very discrete business process, a financial reporting to meet a regulatory requirement, for example. Or I have a manufacturing where I'm literally trying to get a product to market and I have a very discrete process that I'm trying to automate it. Or I have a customer call center where I'm trying to upsell, I'm trying to create this 360 view of a customer because the data spread all over the place. Those are very discrete business projects, right? And that is sort of, I would say, about half of our projects. And those are small to medium size, where it's very discrete, and you can really target it and has milestones. Then we have really the enterprise, and that's about the other half. And these enterprise are saying, we look at our legacy architecture, and wholeheartedly, we need to evolve our organization. Now, these are 5-year projects, some 10-year projects. We did one with the U.S. Army that was 10 years, where they were modernizing their entire infrastructure, going from old legacy systems to cloud data lake solutions, and totally revamping their consumption areas that were old legacy reporting applications to new modern ones, in addition to consolidating their data centers. That problem is this was the material command for the U.S. Army. So they still had to ship product, right? So imagine how much material the U.S. Army moves, procures, manages. And so they literally had to redesign and revamp the airplane while they were still flying it. So what they did was they put this logical framework in the middle where all the business rules decoupled everybody to allow them. So when a business user was coming in, even if they're coming with a new tool, the data was being migrated in real time behind the scenes, and the logical data platform could literally distinguish where that data was currently, grab it from the old and the new, combine it and deliver it so that they could still, manage material. So even in these large platforms, large migrations or large evolutionary changes, you can do both. All right. It really depends on the organization's needs. From that standpoint, a average deployment time can be anywhere from literally as fast as weeks, because remember, it's logical. You're not moving any data. So it's logical. All right. So you can literally be in production. We've had customers who've literally been in production very small within a week, and others, in a gamut have taken maybe a year to get in production. But that's typically anywhere from a week to a year. And it's just a matter of the scale and the complexity of what you're trying to do. Okay. But it's never just one thing. We just happen to be the glue that's putting everything together and enable everything else around it. So we're usually part of a larger initiative.
Yeah. Okay. Understood. Thank you. My next question is basically the why now. My impression is that your approach is very successful at the moment. There's many customers implementing this logical data platform approach. And this is, in the sense, astonishing that you are on the market for, 20 years or something like that, Denodo. So why is it now so successful, this approach? Has something changed during the last 10 years, or is the time just right for your solution?
Yeah, well, I would say, remember in the year 2000 when we had the tech bubble, right? And all the retail businesses are going to go out of business in the next 30, 90 days. Okay, from that standpoint, because everything is going to be electronic, right? That was the hype, right? And remember, all these companies jumped onto the market and started selling stock. There was no revenue, right? And then they all collapsed because the reality is the infrastructure wasn't in place. There weren't standards, there weren't protocols, there weren't languages, right? Everything was sort of proprietary. Over the next 20 years, you can now grab your iPhone or Android or whatever, and you can literally order almost anything: a taxi, food, a hotel, delivery of a package within hours. Everything now is on your phone. So that concept of that tech bubble took almost 20 years of literally the infrastructure, the protocols, the languages, the standards to be put in place, accepted, and the packages. We've just ridden that wave, and now we can put our platform in, and it's pretty much plug and play, because the software that we're connecting to, the legacy systems, are now all in compliant with certain standards: a REST protocol, an OData protocol, an OAuth protocol, a SQL protocols. All of these different sort of protocols are now been standardized and implemented within these organizations, so we can just plug and play, ready to go. In the past, that wasn't the case. And so that's why you can literally implement these and hit the ground running without a lot of overhead, and programming like there was in the past.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And then I got a different type of question. in fact, regarding what you're doing and what you used to do and what you're currently working on. I think you mentioned that you worked for quite a long time in sales and you're now in customer success. And my impression is also what I hear from my colleagues is that Denodo puts very high focus on customer success. And I was wondering, why is customer success so important for Denodo? Is it specific to Denodo, or is it simply such an important aspect of the whole sales process and customers implementing a platform, or is it even something specific to logical data platforms? So why customer success? Why this focus?
Yeah, it's really reaction to what our customers been asking, almost screaming for help. And the reason is they have built decades of experience of moving and packaging data. All right. Mm-hmm. And you think about it, the classic data warehouse was like your refrigerator. A business user could come up, open up the door, and everything was nicely packaged and it was consumable, right? You know, from that perspective. Well, as data has exploded, the cost to do that was no longer feasible. Yet all of their experience, all right, within the organization was based on these large ETL pipelines of copying, standardizing, moving data, getting it into a final product for every consumer. Well, the problem is I can consolidate data, but that doesn't solve my problem of my complexity with regard to my consumers. My consumers are still in the tens of thousands of people. That hasn't gone away. So how do I deliver data, okay, to these tens of thousands of users, right, where their needs are now even faster and even more complex because they're in that high competitive market. And oh, by the way, I got these governance and security now layers that have to be applied, all right? And most of the companies didn't have the experience, didn't have the best practices, didn't have the center of excellence, all right, to go implement and address these problems. And so thus we had to create a customer success organization to literally help train, all right, those staffs and their partners on how to build center of excellences, how to build best practices, because now I'm no longer building physical data sets. I'm building logical data products, right? And I have literally the consumers of the data actually now starting to manage those data products, something they've never done before. They've usually just hit the button, they got data. Now all of a sudden they are being given the tools to manipulate the data products themselves. All right, again, you're trying to move the solution closer to the people who have the problem. This transition away from IT owning everything and moving it closer to the business is a natural evolution. All right, you know, because the tools are becoming more sophisticated, meaning they're easier to use. All right, the best practices of trying to put that together, companies don't have it. We have that expertise because we've learned from other companies doing it, all right, from our partners, from everyone else, and we put those best practices into services packages to enable our customers to be more productive, get greater value out of what they've invested in.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you very much. And I think I have only one question left, and it's kind of a standard question that we always have in our Data Hero series. We always want to look into the future, what trends are coming, what's the next developments that are emerging, and you with your insight perspective.
Yeah, so where we're going, where we see the industry going, not just us, is these logical data platforms are going to become intelligent, are going to become self-aware. Remember the Terminator, right? You know, okay. And these logical data platforms are in a privileged position. What I mean by that is they know where the data is coming from, and they know is where it's going, who is using it. That's a very privileged position to be in. And what happens is you now start adding intelligence to them. What that means is that you want these systems to learn as you use the data. And this becomes very powerful because you can start recognizing patterns of use. And as you start recognizing those patterns of use, you can now start doing 3 unique things that help the customer. One, I can now start improving performance, because as I start recognizing where it's coming from and where it's going, I can recognize when there's bottlenecks in my networks and delays. I can recognize that this source is slow during certain times of the day. I can recognize that the way that I calculate the algorithms of processing the data can change, because I can say, well, I don't have to aggregate all this data. In reality, they're only wanting this very small slice of data. I'll create a cache over on the side, and I'll take queries that might have taken a minute and deliver them in seconds. So one, the system starts learning and delivering faster performance, giving you greater value. So that's one, okay? Meaning you're lowering your cost of your investment, which what IT wants, okay? Second, I can start recognizing patterns of use. And now what happens is that as I'm building out these sort of data products or, semantic models, and I'm recognizing usage patterns, I can all of a sudden say, wow, you're needing data for this. We have other parts of your organization that have already built out views, data product rules that actually have better quality results. Let's make a recommendation. Take a look at these other views. You have the security, you have the right profile, it fits your type of query. We can start making recommendations because we recognize your usage patterns. So now I'm improving their productivity, which is what they're after. They're after speed and better decision in a hyper-competitive market. The system can start making recommendations to them. So I'm improving their ability to basically drive revenue. All right. The third area is in the area of governance. As I recognize these patterns of use, and I've identified almost a profile for, let's say, personal identity data, right? PII type data. And I recognize that pattern of data. And then all of a sudden I start seeing other data products being created elsewhere. And it says, wait a minute, those look identical to these things that have very high security and compliance requirements. I can flag and auto-identify those different data products that says, hey, these should be candidates, all right, for these type of governance and compliance. And so I can auto-enrich data sets, all right, to provide better compliance, better governance within my organization, all right, without the cost of trying to manually do that. And so that level of creating what we now call an intelligent data management platforms is the future, all right, that learns as you use the data. It enforces as you use the data. It recommends as you use the data. That's the future. And our platform is already architected to do all of those capabilities. It's doing it now today, all right? But I would say it's probably in the 6th grade. It's like at the elementary, top level elementary, we're just about to go into the teenage, just being realistic, right? From that perspective. Okay, but it's there now. You have new versions coming out all the time, and our next version's even going to add more to it, from that perspective. But that's where the future is going, intelligent, data management.
Well, thank you very much. I think this was very consistent. You described why the logical data platform is now important for IT, for business and governance, and I think it's an interesting perspective to see that the logical data platform even increased the benefits for all 3 areas, for IT again, for business, and for governance. That's a great outlook, and will be interesting to see what's coming next from Denodo. So thank you very much, Rich. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for giving us some insights into your views and the future of logical data platforms. Many thanks also to all participants today. Thanks for taking the time and joining us. Hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.